Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. And for those of you who've been with us for a while, you know that when you live a revenue culture, you have maximized your profits because you first optimize your people in a low friction revenue context. And when you think about that for a second, nobody's ever going to maximize their profit if their people aren't on board and engaged and creative and innovative. And you can optimize your people, but if you don't optimize them around revenue, they're doing other kinds of stuff which doesn't make any money and doesn't make your company a long-term scalable player. So we're going to talk every 2 weeks. We talk to people out there in the real world who are actively involved in both in their own companies and often, as the gentlemen are today, helping other companies learn how to optimize their people and maximize their revenue. And for those of you who are real long-term viewers with us, you know that in 2026, we're doing some different things. One of those is we've started a revenue game professional community. We are passionate that producing revenue should be done by professionals, and that there are professionals in the field. And those of us who live a professional life, we think everybody should do that. So we're building a community to help make that happen. And we're trying to introduce you to some of the people that, you should be able to look at and say, these people are professionals. I can trust them. They know what they're doing and they're going to support us. The other thing that's new for those of you who missed a month or so, I co-host this year with Josh. And Josh is not only our digital marketing AI guru, but he's my grandson. So that gives him a special place, at least in my world. And so, Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce our guest today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, we have our guests Luke Voivoda and Cameron Eck here. We're very, happy to be here with you guys, and we're just excited to have a good conversation. And for people who are just meeting you guys for the first time, who is Luke and Cameron, and what led you guys into business development in the first place?
Great question, Josh. I'll actually let Cameron start because I think the journey really starts with him.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and thank you both for having us on. This is an honor to be here. But yeah, as I mentioned, I am Cameron Eck. I am the founder and president of a company called Ace Business Development. So started the company a little bit about 3 years ago, I would say, and with the idea of working with small businesses that just had no sales team whatsoever. Was working with a couple different startups that were founder led and had just the founder. That was it, and then through my own business development career in the past, I was in the staffing world for about 6 years. Was starting to network a ton and was starting to do well, spinning up some business there. Had some small businesses that came to me and said, "Hey, I would love for you to go network on behalf of my company." Initially, I thought that was a little bit of an odd proposition because I had a job at the time. But then ultimately realized what we were going to do was we were going to, go to events that his customers were at, not mine for the staffing world. And ultimately through that was able to spin up genuine connections for him, bring in some business, and actually landed other clients through doing that. So from there, decided there was a business to it and really started to grow out a business development company. So, we do all things sales now. And within the last year, we added a business partner to our team, Luke. So that's when I will pass it off to him.
Thanks, Cameron. And again, Rick, Josh, thanks so much for having us. For me, thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. So, Luke Voivoda here, again, Ace Business Development. I won't go ahead and echo everything that Cameron said, but, with really what we try to accomplish is executing sales and business development motions for those who either haven't had the chance to really figure out how to do it themselves yet, don't know how to go about figuring it out and doing it themselves yet, or again, just in general, are needing some support in some phase of the process. With me, my background, I came into ACE about a year ago, but previously to that, I've been in the federal business development scape for basically my entire career. I was starting out in the ranks of a cold caller into the federal government. I was a sales development representative, moved up the chain over into the account executive role where I was doing a lot of different professional services and original equipment manufacturer, O&M sales, and then moved over into being vice president of business development for a smaller government contracting firm before joining Cameron and our third business partner, Jack, to really formulate ACE Business Development and start running with it. So again, actually Cameron and I had initially delineated our roles as being a little bit more of myself being the head of the government contracting practice and Cameron being the head of our B2B practice. But as you do when you're in a small business, you iterate, you learn, you grow. And we learned that it actually works a little bit better for Cameron to be our head of pipeline and really in charge of, again, the business development that ACE is doing, where I'm actually the head of delivery now. And I work on a lot of the business development and the sales that our teams are doing for our clients.
Awesome. And what is it? What's the one thing that you guys saw a problem with in the market that really made you say ACE needs to exist? What was that one thing that made you guys do that?
Yeah, I would say meeting a lot of different business owners that were very involved in the day to day of their business, but couldn't grow because they didn't have the ability to go out and sell. I think there's a lot of people that set out to start businesses because they are very good at something, whether it is they're really good at accounting, really good at cybersecurity engineering, whatever it might be. And when they start their business, they don't dream of cold calling a bunch of people to do business for them or going out to a million networking events trying to find their clients there. They dream of building a business based on their passions. So really what at the end of the day, ACE Business Development does allows them to focus on what it is they want to do while we handle the sales functions for them, ultimately bringing them in more business so that they can continue to grow in that aspect.
And look, the thing is, I think, your guys' listeners know this more than anyone else. Sales is hard, like even for the professionals who do this day in and day out, sales and business development is difficult. And we didn't even necessarily get into the point, which hopefully we will have time later, of what exactly is the delineation between sales and business development, because that's its own conversation, really. But sales, business development, relationship building, whatever jargon or kind of, tag you want to throw against it, it's very difficult. And so, a lot of the folks that we're working with, they're not really sure how to go about doing it. And so they're looking to us again as consulting partners to really understand, not only do I not have the time to do this, but I don't really know the best way to be doing this. And so I'd really like your guys' expertise to know what event should I be going to? How should I look at this person? Are they a referral partner or a lead? How can I stay top of mind with someone so that I can actually build a relationship until they're ready to move forward with me? And, we get to consult in a lot of those ways. So I think it's, a combination of what Cameron's saying, but then also just being able to try to distill knowledge to other folks that just might not have it readily available.
Yeah, Luke, one of the things when you guys introduced yourself and you said why people work with you, the one you guys humbly didn't talk about was how good you are. So I'm glad you talked about skills there. So
yeah,
thanks, right?
And talking about the difference between business development and sales, where do most companies confuse the two, and why does that hurt them?
It's a good question, Josh. It's a very good question. Cameron, do you want to start with it or do you want me to take it first?
you take it.
So, sales and business development. I think off the bat, you just have to think about them having different time horizons, right? And so that is really one of the most interesting things for a company to have to prioritize. And make sure you keep me honest answering questions because I might go off on a tangent. But that to say, I think it comes down to the timeline. And what's difficult for companies is to understand that both of them are abundantly relevant, but you need to be prioritizing the two of them. But most of the time people want to go to sales because it's a shorter time horizon and it's easier for you to have the knowledge and the viewpoint to see the dollars at the end of the tunnel. The biggest thing that I think people forget about is that when you are trying to build out what's going on in the future, it's a lot more of intelligence gathering. It's not really pressing your thumb in on the pain point. It's you trying to understand priorities. It's you trying to understand current state. It's you trying to understand a posture, right? Like I tell all of the consultants that work underneath me that what we do is we go validate assumptions. If we do our job correctly, we come in with a lot of knowledge, but all of this knowledge and conversations and hearsay is just assumptions. So we go in and we start validating that. That is where business development is because you start to understand priorities. You start to understand the strategic roadmap. You're starting to develop a strategic roadmap. Whereas in sales, you're taking sections of this business development and this roadmap and trying to figure out, well, what can we do today that has dollars here? A very simple way to try to put this is let's just talk about a technology piece, right? Features and benefits are what our tech head friends absolutely love. And I can't say that I don't love a good feature and benefit, especially in like an AI solution, right? But if you are trying to figure out how you want to get your AI solution today to being in a government agency, being in an enterprise organization, being completely adopted and sticky somewhere else, it is not just an overnight success there. You are going to need to execute sales to get to that point. But for you to be as sticky as you want in an organization, you're probably going to need to have a feature or benefit that you've never built before. And so you're going to learn about building that through conversations with other people, through user acceptance testing and learning, gee, wouldn't it be great if X, Y, and Z happened? And so, again, all of this to say, and then I'll hand it over to Cameron, is that you need to figure out in conversations what is something that you should put in the parking lot. And this might be something for our next conversation, for our third conversation, for our 10th conversation for us to come back to, where at the same time trying to tackle the low hanging fruit, saying, well, we have this feature and benefit in place today. So let's put at least 5 people on the software, see what they say. And then we'll start figuring out how we can move these next 5 people on the software and get it to 10. And now it's in there. And so it's trying to, nickel and dime your way to the end zone, but always having that end zone in your sights. So,
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think you put it perfectly. That's why I passed that one on over to you. I think in a very simple way to put it, I think sales is a lot more at times transactional, like in the short term as well. Like, how can this help me today? Whereas business development might be a little bit of a lengthier process, but that is a little bit more of a partnership play sometimes too, rather than just trying to get a quick win here or there. But totally agree with everything Luke just said there too.
One of the things, just having worked a little bit with you guys, uh, my observation is you guys teach, and you teach both the buyer and your customer. Because often your customer, Luke, particularly in the federal government, doesn't understand what's going on in the government world, and the government doesn't understand what the solutions are. So
yeah.
that biz dev role's got a teaching element to it.
Absolutely. There's definitely an education component of what we do. I would say there's an education component to all sales, but absolutely for what we're doing. Because again, I think, going back to, the question, Josh, that you asked, why did we start this in the first place, right? It's kind of being a Sherpa sometimes to other folks, right? It's allowing them to understand, sales is, it's not just waving your hands around in a mystic kind of way, right? Like there is data that drives some of the decisions and what we're trying to do. And so we're talking to our clients about the data, about how many inputs we need to do to execute the outputs that we're looking for, about, the way that information in the nebulous is going to impact them and the specific lane that they're in. So 100%, Rick, I think that in a lot of what we're doing, it's educating folks on a problem, it's educating our client on the way to enter a marketplace, it's educating the ultimate buyer, regardless of if it's a public sector entity or a private sector entity, of the solution in place. And again, to what I was just saying, sometimes it's even educating them on the problem if they don't know about it at first.
Kind of going off of that Sherpa rule you talked about, I think this goes hand in hand with that. You guys use the term boots on the ground business development.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean in the real world and for your customers and clients?
Yeah, I would say what that means in the real world is, kind of what it sounds like, boots on the ground. Like we go out into the marketplace and try to make deals for our clients as well. That's, I think, what our differentiator is when we're working with clients is, we're not afraid to get our hands dirty in terms of actually helping them to do the sales, deliver the sale, maybe handhold a lead, through the qualification process up until they're ready to finally work with said client at the time. So I think that's really what we mean by boots on the ground. Like we're going out, we're doing the thing. People out in the marketplace view our consultants as a part of our client's team. So they are seeing that they are representing XYZ company, and they are out and about doing their thing, shaking hands, kissing babies, making connections, and developing some business.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I won't go too much further into what Cameron said there because I think he said it really well. But, one of the main things is just we know the best way to stay professionally persistent and hug that fine line. That is something that I think a lot of people have trouble doing because, you're worried about reaching out too much. You're worried about reaching out too little. I don't want to say we have the golden bullet because I think if, someone had the sales golden bullet, we'd all be listening to their podcast. But we do understand the cadence and the language specifically within the verticals that we specialize in for getting responses, for being able to showcase the value that we have at least enough so that we can move to the next step. And we know that that's where we reside best. Yes, of course, we are happy to do strategy and do work like that. And in fact, we do it for clients where we're doing pipeline strategy. We're talking about the market segment they should be plugging into. Again, specifically within the federal area, we're talking and guiding them a lot on like what a potential federal strategy might look like if they've really only dipped their toes in the water a couple times with that before. But at the end of the day, we know that our professional persistence and the way that our consultants and our team are using our processes to reach out to folks are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of when other groups are doing it. And we like to partner on that strategy side so then we can gain other folks there. So we think that it's a great way to, again, be able to really show where our differentiator is, but then also bring in great sales partner firms so that they might be able to lean into some of the strategy components of a statement of work.
I love that professionally persistent term. And, as I said earlier, we're passionate about trying to create a professional revenue community. And some people would say, oh, that's just your way of saying you're going to be proactive and keep trying. I draw the analogy to your personal physician. I want my personal physician to be professionally persistent. And if I'm doing dumb stuff, I sure hope they keep bringing it up to me. And eventually I recognize they're right. And I should do something different. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And along the lines with the strategies and the processes, Luke, I love the idea that business development is more like chess, while sales can be more like checkers. Could you break that down for us a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Again, I think one of the things is business development, honestly, to try to break it down into one of the most straightforward ways, business development has more stakeholders in it. The sales process is not one-to-one either by any means. There are a lot of stakeholders in the sales process as well. But in the business development process, there are a ton of stakeholders. And again, like let's just even separate, the public sector versus private sector for a little bit. And let's just keep talking about private sector. There are a lot of organizations that have siloed groups, right? That have siloed decision-making power, or just in general, different people own different processes. And so in business development, it's you being able to go in there and start understanding who's the best point of contact to talk to for which topic and what is it that they care about in relation to the goals that they're trying to support, trying to achieve, right? And so in business development, you are looking a lot more long term, and it really does go to what Cameron was saying, which is that it's trust driven, it's relationship driven, it's not transactional. The sales process, again, it can be transactional, and that's not to try to put any negative connotation. It's that just some transactions are exactly that, right? And, in some sales, and if you're a good sales rep, even the more transactional ones, you're building rapport, you're building trust, you're building a relationship. But, in B2C in general, they're not long sales cycles, right? When you're selling something to someone else, it is just a transactional sale. Business development happens when you're trying to penetrate one of those whales, right? When you're doing an enterprise group that has a procurement department that buys and an IT department that really evaluates the IT and sets the strategy, but the program office who's the end user and really wants to actually leverage the solution. When then you have to talk to a different subset of the IT group for the security, and all of those people wasn't the people who owned the purse strings, right? And so in that, you're having these longer conversations. And again, that's why I say that they're not one and the same, but they go along with each other, because once you can identify all those stakeholders, well, now we got, in a sense, an MVP for us to make a sale. But you might just get a light sale if you were being transactional, right? You get the bare bones sale. You're able to ink 5 license for one group for one tiny use case. But what if it was relationship driven? And what if in each of those groups that we talked about, you had one meeting and then that pulsed into a second or third meeting? And now you understand where their priorities are. And then you tell them, you didn't even know that we have features and benefits and backlog that are going to be able to support X and Y and Z. And now through that business development, you've now inked a deal that is 50 to 100 license for all of those use cases that likely have outside swing, where long tail benefits, where they could get stickier and larger license counts. And yes, that took you 2 years to do instead of a potential 1 year for the 5 license. But isn't it now better that you've done that, because you're now stickier in a lot of these groups? So I think like that's one of the ways I'd really try to describe like this difference, is that there's so many other priorities that you have to account for in business development, but eventually route them back to the sale you're trying to make. Whereas someone who is maybe just focusing on the sale is trying to figure out what hurdles are immediately in front of me to get an inked deal. So
I love, you just taught me a story now I can tell, which is chess and checkers are played on the same board, but in a very different way.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's going to take you longer to play chess than it is checkers, but they're both fun. So
Cameron, you've talked about how indecision kills growth. Why do so many businesses stall on that middle ground of maybe later instead of making a clear yes or no decision?
Yeah, I think just buying yourself a little bit of time makes you feel better in the short term. Putting off that decision longer and longer, you don't have to make a tough decision right then and there. But putting off that decision to, do business development or really do anything, the longer you push off that decision to say go, like the longer it's going to be to see results. Like if you say yes today to working business development with us, we get going today. If you say yes in 6 months from now, we get going in 6 months, and then we're starting the process from there. And we have so many different stories now after doing this for a few years about, clients who, or prospects, I would say, that were hesitant at first, weren't really quite sure. And then, 6 months in, we're still talking about, do you want to or not? And it's like, well, we could have had deals for you. We could have been tracking opportunities. We could have been doing this. But I think it's just the reason they push it off is just because, sometimes decisions are tough to be made. And that's where we're at these days. So, but try to help them along the process, like seeing the value early on as to like, wanting to work with us, or, again, any solution doesn't have to be necessarily working with us, but why they want to be starting that sooner rather than later.
And as we create this community and this partnership together, what do you guys believe that you can help this community do that it could not effectively do on its own before?
I think just kind of driving back to the point that we were talking about earlier, which is that, we can support in a couple of different areas, but we see ourselves as being execution partners above all else. A lot of people understand, in a sense, where they want to go when they come and talk to us. And of course, to again, everything that we've been talking about echoing, we're chatting with them about validating some of those assumptions, right? I assume that we can sell my technology, my brain power, my services into this group. And, that's great. And then we need to go validate it. But a lot of the time, people do have a thought about the strategy and they just need some support. And I think that there's a lot of great folks out there who can help with that, supporting the strategy, fleshing out a roadmap, saying, here is how we're going to, this is your current state, this is the future state, here's the delta, this is the game plan. Well, then that becomes shelfware. Right? That game plan, that blueprint that someone spent all of the time working on can become shelfware. And again, that is regardless of whether they were working late into the night on their own accord, they were in a strategy specific consulting agreement, or they spent all night up with their buddy ChatGPT, right? It doesn't necessarily matter how they came up with that blueprint. A lot of the times they're worried about being able to execute that blueprint well, or man, this blueprint or what I just developed is a 17-step process. I don't even know when I'm going to have time for step 1A, right? that is where I think that we come into the fold to support, which is that, we are advising on the process so that there can be live edits because it is a living document. But at the same time, if we are getting told this is where we want to go in, then our whole purpose is for us to start putting the boots on the ground and going in that direction. And so I think like that's one of the best ways that you can think about us is that when Cameron and I are talking with our consultants, when we're initially talking to prospects and bringing them on as clients, we are trying to do our best to give strategy, to educate, to put thoughts in there. But at the end of the day, too, we want people to understand that, we have folks that know how to be boots on the ground and know how to go get traction places. And, whether we think that maybe it would be better for you to go into a different market segment at this point, if we've agreed that we are going into market segment A, then we are going to be doing everything in our power to be penetrating market segment A, even if hypothetically we'd love to have a conversation with them in the future about why they could also penetrate market segment B.
Yeah.
And what's one question that more business owners should be asking before they chase more leads?
I think one question that they should be asking before they chase more leads is really what is their process for chasing those leads? I think a lot of times people early on in the process maybe just want to run around. We talk about networking events a lot. Maybe they want to run around to a million different networking events and want to just hope to run into someone great that's a great client of theirs and makes them tons of money for years and years and years. But a lot of times they don't have a strategy when it comes to that. Like they don't put themselves in the right rooms, don't really have an idea of who they want to talk to. And even if they do find someone, maybe they don't have the right process in place for how they want to develop that business with them. Sometimes they might want to rush to the sale. They want to, someone says, oh yeah, I'm potentially interested in that. And they just want to start throwing numbers at them for what they can do to start doing business with them. So I think that process is, something that's really good and it's always developing. It's not like you need to, write one down right now and follow that for the rest of your life. But, have a process in place that you can follow, tweak it when necessary, but follow that and you'll be a lot more successful. I think that's what holds a lot of people back.
I actually think also this is kind of taking what you're talking about, what Cameron just said, because I completely agree with everything Cameron just said to the T. But I think one other thing to put in there is actually like expectation setting, I think holds a lot of people back. And it takes me a minute to exactly articulate what I mean here, but I really think it just comes down to people getting disheartened that they're not getting their expected return on investment or ROI. And again, like kind of trying to drive that further is I think about events a lot when I'm trying to articulate this point I'm trying to make, which is that when people go to events, they are constantly looking for a lead or a closed deal or almost on the closed deal. Let's give some people the benefit of the doubt. To me and to the sales professional community, that's you basically saying that unless I get something new entering the sales funnel, or I get something that is put right at the 99th, like percentile, right there where I can start to shove it into the closed one category, that this was not a successful event. And, I think like that is poor expectations walking in. That is you setting yourself up for failure and you setting yourself up for a way that you're never going to get the ROI that you expected from something like that. And then it disheartens you from wanting to attend the next event or the one after that because you keep thinking, I'm not getting the ROI that I'm looking for. So when people walk in and they have better expectations, thinking, okay, this industry day for government is put on by this agency. And there's a lot of people here who I've probably never talked to before that have a really unique take on the problem that I'm looking to solve. Perhaps I can go and chat with a whole bunch of them and learn something new. And then maybe they can introduce me to someone. That's what I like to call mid-funnel work. And maybe it's not as glamorous as, you being able to say, I just closed one a deal, or you saying like, I got a new lead in the pipeline that seems really juicy. But that's where a lot of work comes. You being able to generate a good relationship with a partner firm who's going to be able to round out a statement of work. You being able to listen to the keynote speaker and then actually take that knowledge and drive it into a solution. Or again, to what I'm saying, like you being able to meet with the ultimate client or customer that you're trying to ink and, you trying to get knowledge from them. right there alone, that's three different ways that you can derive value from an event. But if you don't believe that what I just said is valuable, then you're probably not going to get the ROI that you're looking for on an event. And then you're going to have bad expectations, and you're never going to go out to an event, and you're never going to put yourself in a position to be lucky. Because at the end of the day, in sales, you have to be good and you need to be lucky. And I think that when people, again, kind of start saying, woe is me, I'm never going to get, I'm shooting too high, again, it's great to shoot high, right? You want to shoot for the moon, but sometimes, just temper the expectations and think that, I don't need to swing it out of the park and get a grand slam here. Just a base hit is going to be really helpful for my knowledge in this area for me to push this opportunity forward.
I really appreciate you guys' answers, because as I think about what we hope the community is going to deliver, we talked about that lead gen piece that Cameron was mentioning, and then trade shows are a science. And if you don't know that science, they're just a place to pour money.
Yeah.
And, if you do know the science, you can have a 6-month communication with clients 3 months before. Hey, the show's coming. We're going to be there. Can we have coffee? And then 3 months after to, what did you learn? What are we going to do? And, and there's a lot to it. We hope the partnership brings together those people who are show experts with those who know the difference between a marketing campaign that just produces a bunch of clicks and a marketing campaign that actually creates really potential customers that sales wants to talk to, and they want to talk to sales. And so, I think it's exciting because I'm guessing when you guys create a scope of work with your client, you take a look and see how much help are they going to be to me? Do they actually already know some people we should know?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the ability to even do an onboarding? Do they know how to do a joint statement of work? Do they know how to get leads? They say they get leads, but I don't really see any real leads. So when you're doing contracts, do those client capabilities enter into how you contract?
Yeah, I would say so. Cameron, I'll let you take this start, but I would say just a bottom line up front. Yes.
Yeah, we definitely take those into consideration because if we're going to be going out and doing business development, we want to make sure that whatever we are selling for them is actually able to get executed at the end of the day. And so we got to kind of vet that out a little bit with them. Like, if we're doing our job and land them a new client, but then at the end of the day, they say, I can't support this work right now. I'm too full, or I can't do this, whatever it is. Like, yeah, makes our job really tough, and it kind of makes what we're doing at that given time, a little bit pointless. So we want to be able to vet out at the beginning, like, what their business strategy is and how they expect to grow. Because ideally, we're going to be growth partners with them. Like,
Yeah.
if we're doing our job, we are growing with them. And if they have an inability to grow, it doesn't matter how great we do at the front end of developing business, because then everything just falls flat on its face.
Well said. Thank you.
One more question from me. If you have to leave our audience with one rule for building revenue through relationships, what would that be?
Revenue through relationships. See, I think my problem is just one rule is so hard. I mean, relationships, I say this actually to people all the time. I think relationships drive the world. And I could go into a whole podcast about that because I've said that to so many people, and I think relationships truly are the linkage and just the reason so many things actually end up happening versus not happening. I think the main thing is, and I don't want to keep kind of going back to this transactional thing, right? Because I don't think that that's helpful, but I think it's a value added mentality is something that I think a good sales representative, a good business developer really needs to have, regardless of, again, like how transactional versus trust driven your sales cycle is, because those can be different things. I think any good sales representative is learning, what what is happening in the client's mind and why is that happening? And I think I've talked about this maybe on even one of the other podcasts, but I talk about like your layers of questions, right? And it's like onions, it's like layers of an onion, and you peel back a layer of the onion, you get to the next question, you get to the next question. And I think, you know, the thing is you have to ask the question, and good sales reps are going to be doing what I'm talking about regardless, but they might be doing it a bit more transactional. So I think you have to ask these second or third layer questions, but again, in kind of an empathetic way, so that you can then say, like, again, I understand where you're coming from. And again, one of the best ways to describe it is really just through an example, which is, someone asking on a sales demo, oh, does this software right here allow me to change the color of the emails that come through depending on the client? Something, right? And like some sales reps, when you get interested, right, that's a buying signal right there, right? Because in a sense, that's a buying signal because they're starting to ask some questions. They're getting excited. Some people pounce on that. Absolutely. You can change it in so many colors. You can change this. You can do this. You can change this. Let me also show you these other features and benefits, how you can change the tab colors and how you can change your cursor color. Okay, great. That's great. You know what? You did jump on that. And if that was really something they cared about, then you jumped on it. But what's actually better is to say, you know what, Josh, that's a great question. Let me dive into that because there's a couple things I want to point out. Why do you ask that? And now you're at the second layer of that onion question and you ask it. And you know what? You might also have a pitfall because, sure, they might say, oh, well, I'm asking that because, we have so many clients. It'd be really, really nice to be able to color code things. But they also might be asking, and you might not know that you could step on a landmine because they might say, we just need to know because our last system changed colors. And for some reason, it kept doing it without us knowing. And so we kept emailing red contacts when they should have been blue contacts. And we got confused and sent a whole bunch of notes. And so, like, not only is it helping you bulletproof your sales process, but you're starting to understand what they talked about. And now we just understood, again, regardless of whether it was the negative or the pro reason, you can say, well, yeah, to answer your question, absolutely, we can do the changing colors thing. But also, we actually have the CRM feature that enables you to Rolodex out your clients, and it makes it really easy for you to make sure your correspondence is going to the right party. And so now you understood the question, and you understood that you answered their question, but now you also understand the root of their question, and now you're able to actually go and address their root even better by looping it into something else. And so I think like that's one of the biggest things that I would really push forward there, which is that like when you have to be looking at how can I provide value to someone? Why is someone asking this question? Because they're looking for value in some way, shape, or form. And I think like that's the thing that people forget about because, we all do it. I mean, even I still cold call for some accounts. And when someone seems like they're interested in a meeting, I have to rein myself back to start saying, all right, well, then when do you want to set up that time? I have to start, again, keeping myself honest and asking more questions about the process to drive the need before we go into the meeting. So I think like in a nutshell, Josh, that's really how I'd answer your question is you've got to be figuring out how you can derive value, whether that be through, the initial conversations, more pointed questioning or what have you. You got to come back to like, what's in it for them and how can I be providing them value?
Yeah. No, I think that was a great rule right there. If I had to come up with a different one, to, add a little bit of content here, I think a different rule for me would be to, every relationship that you make is a valuable one. It might not be valuable to you right then and there, but I think everyone, as long as there seems to be some kind of, good connection between the two of you, like at least shoot them a LinkedIn connection afterwards, or send them an email, say, hey, nice to meet you, let's keep in touch, because you never know, it might not be something that is directly relevant to you in that moment right then and there, but who knows, like we're all in this for the long game. You never know where a relationship could take you. That person who's at a company that has nothing to do with what you do and has no interest in working with you might be somewhere else 6 months or a year, and then it's a great relationship because you have a warm intro there basically. So that'd be my thing, is just don't shortchange any relationships that you make.
Kevin, I love that because uh, you say long game. I've been in the game for a long time, so I'm always surprised, pleasantly surprised, when people I sometimes haven't talked to in 10 years reach out and say, remember me? And, it's from way back when. And somehow there was enough of a connection, or they decided they trusted you And here they go and reach out and start a whole new dialogue all those years later. And so I'm a firm believer in what you just said. So
And it goes
Mhm.
back, I think, like, they do that because they thought you provided them value, right? Because you built a trustworthy relationship with them. And so I agree. I mean, I actually had someone the other day, I had one of my old interns, we ended up running into each other at a networking event. And she came up to me and she was saying, "Do you remember me from this organization, from this?" And I was like, "Oh man, it is so great to see you. I haven't seen you in forever." And we're chatting and I'm asking her about how she's doing and what she's up to. And even to, again, your point, she was turning and introducing me to some of her colleagues that attended the event. And she was saying, she's like, "This is the guy who did mock sales calls with me." Because I would make her like cold dial me on the phone already, and we would run sales calls together, mock sales calls. And so, you know what? Like, it's like you said, it's like sometimes it's not even the thing that like you think is immediately providing value to you in the moment, kind of combining what, I was saying with what Cameron's saying to what you're saying. It's, you just treated someone with respect. You helped them where they were in the moment, gave them trust, gave them value. And you know what? They appreciated it so much that you pop back into their mind 10 years later to think, like, you know what? You know who helped me really well last time was this gentleman. Maybe they can help me again. So,
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think people are gonna really remember how you made them feel, and
yeah.
maybe a little bit less of what you said.
Amen. Well said. Well said. That's a life lesson.
absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
this is where we typically ask you guys what you think the future is going to bring. And today, because of how interesting our world has become, uh, I'm going to give you a little different way to think about that. Um, most of the people I know running businesses are kind of struggling with what do I do next because the price of gas is going through the roof. All the boomers are retiring. Um, we have we're trying to onboard manufacturing. Uh, there's all kinds of this stuff going on. As you think about the world that you live in, the professional sales world, how does that change all the volatility in our economy? How does that change how you work with your clients? And what advice do you have both for your clients and for your customers?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think with the way things are changing, like relationships are more important than ever, especially in a AI world that we're seeing right now. Like, you could be scrolling through LinkedIn or any social media, and like can never really tell anymore what's real and what's fake. So I think relationships are really, really, you know, more important than ever now because there's a million different tools you can use. There's a million different services, products that you could use, all of that stuff. I think relationships are really going to be the name of the game at the end of the day, because I still think humans really value interpersonal connection, and they want to know who they're working with, and they want to work with people that they enjoy, and hopefully do some business together at the end of the day.
I think
Excellent.
one thing that's really interesting, I've actually talked with friends about this at length, but not necessarily on any platform. But you know, yeah, AI has made it very interesting that knowledge is no longer valued at exactly the level it used to be. Because the whole concept of AI is that you can obtain information in a split second. Like I will use AI for a myriad of different workflows. And like without us talking about, how great it is or how helpful but like just in general, as far as its versatility goes, I leverage it for client work, I leverage it for internal work, I leverage it for preparation, I leverage it in my home life for different things. And so knowledge now is becoming something that is a little bit more free flowing than it was before. But that doesn't mean that you should take that for granted. And so, what I really mean by that is I think you should use AI to streamline your ability to consume knowledge because now there's so much more available to you. And I really try to say this to people in the terms of just a 15-minute working block. Before, if I was taking 15 minutes to read up on a lead that I was walking into a discovery call with, right? There was only a finite amount of information that I had available to myself, right? There was, maybe their LinkedIn, there was maybe an SDR's call transcript that I could look through, there was a company website, and I have 15 minutes to try to run through all of that and review things. Now, at the top of those 15 minutes with AI, I can take my call transcript, I can take the prospect's LinkedIn, I can take their Facebook, I can take the company website, I can take about 12 other things. I can throw it into a model that I've previously worked on that understands that I'm asking it sales related questions, and I can get a whole bunch of outputs about what this person is, their sentiment, what they'd maybe be looking for, and make it a bit more relevant and tailored to the offering that, in this case, like fractional business development services that I'm trying to talk to them about. And so I say all this to say that 15 minutes with a whole bunch of disparate inputs would yield good results. But now 15 minutes with AI driven outputs can yield really great results. So I would recommend that most people do that in this new age is, AI is great, but don't just think about, oh, well, that was a good question on call. And then you trying to grab that knowledge in the moment because it popped up. Do your prep work still, but figure out how you can prep smarter. And I think that's really where the good sales reps are going to find efficiencies.
Yeah. One of the things I love about what you guys were just talking about is the opportunity to be curious about your clients and their organization and their past and their future and their goals. Where before you almost felt intrusive when you would ask certain questions. Now AI solves that problem for you. You already know everything when you start, and you can create anchoring relationships based on those facts instead of having to just ask those factual questions, feel uncomfortable. So it is different.
I also think that we're in the age that everyone understands that artificial intelligence is being leveraged by a lot of folks too. So I also don't know if we're at the point where, I think we're past the point where you have to be cryptic about your AI usage too. I think it's completely fine to share that. Like I won't go into too much detail, but even recently, one of my clients has some AI triggers to they attach that to their prospects, and that way, in case anything comes up about them that's relevant for them to know about, they're immediately notified. Well, AI is so good now that it actually gave my client, it actually gave them a notification about something that was happening with the prospect, with the lead, before the lead even really knew about it. And so when we sent them an email saying like, hey, congratulations on this award, they responded back saying, thanks. How did you know about this before we did? And you know what? We just told them. We were like, oh, well, we have a system that we want to make sure we're keeping tabs on everything that's happening. And we found out first. And so, you know what? Like, it was completely fine. They thought it was funny. And in fact, they were happy that they got the information because were the ones who sent it to them. But again, I think that that's an interesting one there too, where it's like, you know what would you say to that if you weren't transparent and truthful? Which again, I think
it's wonderful. And I hope they would interpret it as you care.
Exactly.
So, okay. Last question for you. What do you want to tell everybody listening, whether they're potential clients, whether they're potential partners, potential employees for yourself? What do you want to tell them about where you guys are going and where you think the world's going, and that would just be good to pass on to your neighbors or your friends or your kids?
I'll start and I can let Cameron end it. But I think the main thing is, that business development is a variant test. I think like that's what I would say to a lot of different people is if you are really serious about your growth in a longer term perspective, you need to understand that again, sales is a subset of business development, and that good business development will elicit sales, but that you need to be on a similar time horizon as the business development trajectory is. And I think like that's really in a nutshell what I would tell folks is because we have clients across the map where we're doing different things for them, different portions of their workflows, different areas of their sales funnel. But then with that, we have different durations of work. And the groups that we have been able to turn out the best work for are the ones who have put their money where their mouth is, that have said, we are looking to grow and we need some support, and have given us autonomy and free reign and the time to say, go start developing things. And that is where our best clients have really yielded the results. And just in general, it's a lot easier for us to do that on those types of engagements than when, we're kind of in the weeds about sales leads, things of that nature. So
Yeah, adding on to that, I would really just say trust the process. Like business development is a process. It's not overly transactional. If you're working with us, we're never going to promise that we're closing deals in month one because it's a process where we're putting good steps in place and a good foundation to set you up for a ton of success down the road. That's what business development is. So really just have to trust the process and trust the experts. We do business development for a living, day in and day out. A lot of people have business development experience as well and have done it before, but they're bringing a company like us on for a reason. Like trust our process and you'll be good.
Excellent. Joshua, comment, final question or comment or?
Well, I'd just like to say, Luke and Cameron, I really appreciate you guys both for being here today and sharing your knowledge and perspectives. I'm very excited about what we're building together. I hope everybody else is as well. And I know our audience got a lot of, value out of our conversation today. So I just want to thank you guys both, and it was a pleasure to have you guys.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah, really appreciate the time today.
Thanks so much for having us.
so to the audience, you got Cameron and Luke's phone numbers and stuff on the screen. I know they won't feel bad if you reach out and want to talk to them about business development or sales or outsourcing or any of those kinds of things. We will be back in 2 weeks with another Living a Revenue Culture Day. And you can also reach out to Josh and I if you want to. We'll be happy to help as well. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. So thank you, everybody. See ya.